Hello, Reset with Raven family. Welcome back. Grief and devastation aren't topics regularly discussed, yet they impact us to our deepest core. So I knew it was something that we had to talk about on this platform. Today, I'm joined by Juliet Nelson. Juliet is such a multi hyphenated person that there are so many things that we could discuss. She is a business owner, co founder, author, doctoral student, diversity and inclusion specialist, and a friend devoted to purposefully honoring her best friend's life. She is truly an agent of motivation, inspiration, and encouragement to the world around her. And I am excited to speak with her today. Welcome, Juliet.
Thank you for having me, Raven. Welcome.
Juliet, you've accomplished so much and you continue
Thank
to
you.
empower people to achieve their highest standards. So, the
Absolutely.
big question for me is what is inspiring you to be so impactful?
I think it's something that's just been instilled in me since I was a kid. I grew up as a preacher's kid. My father also is a teacher. My mother's a dietitian and registered nutritionist. So I've grown up seeing my parents serve in the church, serve in their work, serve people in their community, and so on and so forth. And so, that's something they've kind of always passed over to me. My mother, I remember growing up and her always asking me, like, what are you passionate about? How do you feel like you can serve? How do you feel like you can help out? So I think those were just things that were instilled in me from very early on. And I mean, of course, experiences help shape your understanding of what your purpose is and what your calling is. So that also played a significant role in just me intrinsically being motivated to impact other people as well.
That's good. As you were talking about like your experiences shape you, it brought me back to an experience at the time I wasn't fond of, we'll put it that way, but I learned so much through it. And it actually made me start to question some things, question
Right.
why I was doing certain things, how I was showing up, what my values were. Was I honoring my values? What even are values? Like I really started to like take a deeper dive into like figuring, I guess, me out. I don't know that sometimes we like study ourselves and get an understanding of like what makes us tick and what's important. And as you talked about, like what you're passionate about.
Right.
And when we met offline, you shared with me that you had a very traumatic, I guess that's the term I would use, experience that happened to you. I think it was back when you were, was it in college? But I know it was a good friend of yours. Talk to us more about how that experience really shaped some of the things that you're doing now and how it's really shaped and changed you.
Right. This was actually, I mean, after college, before my doctoral journey, I want to say 2017. My best friend of almost 20 years, well, one of my best friends, because I do have a living best friend, one of my best friends of almost 20 years dealt with an aggressive form of depression or a mental illness. And unfortunately, he did not come back from that. And he ended up committing suicide and losing his life. And when you've lost someone, it's bad enough losing someone. Let's start there, right? It's bad enough losing someone, period. Whether suddenly, unexpectedly, whether you saw it coming or not. But then when when the person takes their own life, that hits really different. And I think it put me in a very, very hard place, especially for someone who, I saw what he was dealing with, and of course I tried to help. And so you're stuck in this place of like, okay, I knew I tried, but was there anything else I could do? And then I realized that in grieving his loss, I found that yes, there was grief, but it also uprooted a lot of pain that I had never dealt with. And so that kind of jump started and kick started my own journey of healing. And, evolving, and it was a roller coaster, right? I struggled with seeing how I could honor my best friend's life, knowing how he passed away, and then finally saying, you know what, let me see if I can do something positive. And even that's a roller coaster, because sometimes you might feel like you're honoring them in one way, and maybe you find that it's not working, and then you start to be hard on yourself, and then you find other ways to honor them. But I found, for me, like, the best way for me to honor my best friend was to have those hard conversations with myself, seek therapy, be willing to really deal with those things that were causing me pain, and be willing to overcome them, be willing to continually grow, be willing to continually heal. And that's kind of gotten me to the point of where I'm at now. So
Yeah. When we initially, met and talked offline, it's at the time of this recording, it's been a lot of, I would call, I guess, famous or celebrity or people
yeah.
of notoriety. And one of the things that stood out to me, they were young, Black, successful. And I guess I use successful in air quotes because something that I find myself like grappling with as I'm on my own self journey is like, what does that mean? What does success mean?
Right.
And that's one of the things that struck me, about your story. And when you're talking about like having to do your own work, like hearing about celebrities, and then as you think about your best friend who passed away, it opens up the conversation, right? It opens up the conversation of people dealing with mental illness.
Yeah.
How do you help? Is there some guilt of feeling like, well, I didn't do enough, or I should have done more, or why am I still here? Just a lot of different questions that start going through your mind. And for me, one of the things that continues to come up is like, you never know what people are going through,
Yes.
or sometimes you don't know the extent to it because we
Yeah.
have our faces that we show to the world, and things that we may internally or privately be dealing with or battling with. I want to know, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, like what were
Sure.
some of like the initial things that you did to, I don't know if the term is like cope or manage that grief or that feeling after losing someone, because I think this is really valuable for people to hear, because I've noticed with the recent passing of the former Miss USA, Chesley was her name, that like it's something I can't shake lately. And I don't know if it's because she's young, Black, gifted, 30, same age as me, all those things, like I cannot shake that. So I'm just curious to know, like, what are some of the, like, I guess more like specific steps that you took? And then for anybody who's, feeling bad about themselves, like, why have I not like gotten over it? And I don't know if you ever get over something like that in a certain amount of time. Like, talk to us about that time, the process. What's that been like for you?
It's actually been a journey for me. I've had to be okay with the fact that grieving is not, it's a tough thing for me. Death is a tough thing for me. And I even found that separation is even tough. So I will say, I think when my best friend had initially passed away, it was something like that knocked the wind out of me. To be very honest, there is a couple of months after he passed that I just have very little recollection of, because the grieving process was that traumatic, it was that difficult. And without saying too much, I would say that I kind of ended up in a spiral where I wasn't taking the healthiest approaches to grieving. And one of those approaches was overworking myself. There was the point of, I remember when I found out he passed away, I was back with my parents in New York. I currently live in Maryland, and I drove back to Maryland. I spent one day in the house crying, screaming, yelling, and then drove back to Maryland. And I went back to work. And that was hard. That was really hard. And, it's just, you're in a place where the pain is not just emotional, it's physical. So you are desperate to do anything to get rid of that pain. And so, there were some unhealthy decisions that I'd taken on. And I remember one of my friends having a very honest conversation with me, in love, but very honest, and saying, like, you're going to end up just like your deceased best friend if you don't get it together. It's okay to hurt, but you have to be willing to, you know, find healthier ways to cope with what you're dealing with. And it was a hard conversation I had to have with myself, where it wasn't just, family and friends and so on and so forth that I had to live for, that my best friend had to live for while he was alive. Sometimes we need to know that we need to live for ourselves. And so it was a matter of healing because I mattered to myself, because I had value to myself, and having to learn to love myself, and understanding and accepting that value that I had for myself, and getting to a place where, in coping with grief, in coping with hard times, that I knew that there were some unhealthy habits that I just didn't want to do, because it didn't erase the problem. It didn't get rid of the problem. It didn't alleviate the pain or anything like that. So that's where I was really forced to find other ways. Therapy. When my best friend had passed away, I'm grateful that, I had people at work, my manager, who immediately sent me to the employee assistance program. And that's not something that I'm ashamed to say. And that led into me discovering things about myself that transitioned me into getting a therapist to deal with some of the more deeply rooted issues. So that's really how I started to cope. And even, last year was a tough year. Lost perhaps 25, 30 plus people close to home. But at this point, almost 5 years later, I'm kind of in the space like, I don't want to go through the same trauma of grieving that I did years ago. So you're really finding healthier ways. And it's an ongoing process. It's really an ongoing process, because the reality is the person is never coming back. And I'm about to graduate with my PhD. When I started my business, there were so many times when I wanted to, and it was almost like a second nature thing, where I picked up my phone and I'm getting ready to like type in the area code or search his name. And then I'm like, oh crap, he's not here. And so, sometimes those emotions come back. Some years it is hard, where you have milestone years or things happen and you're like, wow, I wish this loved one of mine was there. And you have to find another healthy process to learn to cope with how you're feeling at that time. But for me, it was really dealing with how I was feeling, okay with the fact that I was hurt and I was angry and I was in pain, and then deciding that, I didn't want to take on healthy habits to deal with my pain, but I really wanted to see what healthy approaches I can take. And it's a learning process, but what healthy approaches I could take to really deal with the grief.
Mm. Yeah, as you're talking about healthy habits or healthy decisions, that made me, and building new habits, made me think about too how at the beginning you share with us like how your dad is a preacher, so preacher's kid, so teaching, and then your mom is a nutrition or dietitian.
Yes, she's a dietitian and a nutritionist. I guess they have two different licensure terms. I don't know. I don't get into it, but she
Yes, it made me think about like how like it's like rooted in you too. Like it's rooted in you to go back to those like healthy habits. Wow, that's good. Another
And I'm
thing.
grateful because my parents also, I think it was also a learning curve for my parents. I grew up, my parents are Haitian, and that's the community that I grew up in. My best friend, my late best friend, he was also Haitian, child of Haitian parents. And you'll find in West Indian, Afro-Caribbean, Hispanic, even Black cultures, mental illness is very taboo. And I know in Haiti, you don't always hear, or in Haitian communities, you don't always hear of mental health professionals. In your faith-based spaces, you're always calling on God or your higher power to fix the problem. We don't accept that it's okay to look at mental illness just like you look at high blood pressure, or just like you look at diabetes or or cancer or something, right? Where you need a specialist to really guide you through that treatment process. We don't look at them that way. And sometimes we don't take the mental illness as seriously. We might say it's a demon or something like that, or and fighting demons, that is a mental illness. You know what I mean? Those are things, that conversations that we don't want to be honest about. We give the label of that someone's crazy, right, to kind of just write them off, or we're expecting that a mental illness, having a mental illness is supposed to look like something. For example, former Miss USA, what I remember reading a blog about of high functioning depression. And that's a real thing. That is a real thing. I know after my best friend passed away, I was working maybe 12 to 15-hour days, and I was directing 4 choirs in 2 different states. And it was working for me. Like, I was just going, because I didn't have to deal with the pain that I was going through. But what happens when, the dust settles, right? And you have to go to bed and you're in the home by yourself, right?
You got to go back and deal with yourself. All of
Right.
yourself
And
is
it's
still
hard.
there. Yeah, it
Right.
made me
It
think about like
eliminate the pain.
escapism, right?
Right.
I
So
thought about it when you were talking about overworking. It made me think about escapism or watching TV. It's a distraction. But as soon as you turn that TV off or look away or stop working or stop directing the choir, whatever is there, it's still there.
Right. And I think there's a level, it's very, very hard. It's a hard process, and I validate that, and whoever's listening to this podcast, I'm not saying that this is easy. I'm almost 5 years in after my best friend passing away. And sometimes I have hard days, and I've had to learn to be kind to myself in that process. And I've had to learn to be okay with the fact that, listen, it's going to hurt sometimes. It's going to hurt, and hard times are meant to hurt. You're not supposed to be this superhero who is just not feeling the pain. And I've had to also accept that. I've had to have those conversations with my parents, like, listen, this hurts, and I want to sit in this hurt for a little bit because it really hurts and it really sucks. And I will take the steps to, address it and overcome the hump, but I still need to sit in this for a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I need to acknowledge that this does hurt. I need to say that this matters because I said so, right? Because I think sometimes the fact that we bury our pain, not because it doesn't matter, but it's almost our defense mechanism of looking tough, of the fear that people are going to tell us that our pain doesn't matter, and so on and so forth, So for me, I feel like it's important for us to acknowledge that, yes, the hurt is real, and it's okay that I'm hurting. I have the right to feel bad, and even if someone didn't have bad intentions or whatever, it doesn't take away from my hurt. So processing that grief, processing that hurt, and then taking the steps necessary to address it. And of course, it's never going to eliminate the problem. So drinking yourself to sleep, staying high for an extended period of time, even harming yourself, it doesn't take the problem away, And I've had to have tough conversations with certain people as well. Like, hey, if you take your own life, it's a harsh reality. It is not going to eliminate the problems you have. It's not going to take them away. They're still going to be there. You think that you're doing everybody a favor by taking your own life. No, it causes everybody pain. And if you remove everybody, again, you still have yourself to live for. You are so important, and you are as valuable for the other people that you're living for. And that's enough of a reason within itself. So.
Yeah, you said that we need to live for ourselves. And that's really, like, I feel like it's like vibrating through me. We need to live for ourselves because so many times we're living for someone else.
Oh my gosh.
Someone else's acceptance, someone else's validation, someone else's support, someone else's acknowledgement. So as you were saying that, it really stood out to me of like when you're grappling with whatever grief problems, when you're in your own valley, I guess is the term that comes to mind. After going through this and doing a lot of self-work, building these new habits, you've continued to create, you've continued to evolve, and you celebrate individuality, self-expression, and everyone like being in their own calling. Talk to us more about like how you're doing that. Talk to us about how you're doing it through your companies. I'd love to know how it's like you channeled pain and you were like, okay, let me make this into something, how can I pull beauty out of this? Even though I'm hurting, how can I pull beauty out of this? And that's something that stood out to me because you are just so creative and innovative. So talk to us more about how you've really channeled that energy.
Absolutely. What I will mention, and this is my experience, I think losing life in that manner taught me to celebrate life. It
Mm.
taught me to truly value and celebrate life, celebrate my life and that of those around me. You know, it's always my prayer when I wake up in the morning. That is one thing I always pray for, that I step out with kindness, with love, with grace and compassion. You know, I don't know what other people are going through. I knew what it was like to go through my own thing, and I know what it is like to go through my own things. So that's how I choose to step out. And so every day that I wake up and I know that someone around me is alive, to me it's just a blessing, you know, knowing that I'm not on this planet by myself, but there are so many other people surrounding me. And so that being said, you know, JUNURI was the first baby that was created. That was actually not my idea, because I didn't want to be a business owner, if I'm being honest. I know that it takes a lot of work and so on and so forth. I didn't want it. It was someone else's idea. But that actually, the idea of that came out of a time of fasting and prayer that I'd done. And the answers I got were not to any other questions I had, but it was more that, you know, I had a story to tell. And I had pain and success and passion and purpose to share with other people. And I could also empower other people to tap into their purpose and share with others as well. And so that's what started JUNURI, really helping people tap into who they are academically, professionally. And then sometime after that, I was inspired to publish a book, which is an homage to my younger self, of the things that I wish I knew going into college. But even in that book, there are many themes of really understanding who you are, right? I think sometimes the reason why life is so hard for us as human beings is because we don't know ourselves. And we live in a world where there's always a status quo. There's a definition of what's normal. And if you don't fit into what's normal, then you're considered weird. But what happens is when you really take the time to understand who you are as a person, you learn to appreciate yourself as that individual, and you understand what you need. And then you're able to step into spaces and communicate those needs. You're able to step out as your best authentic self. And I can guarantee you the world will adjust. So that also launched JUNURI Publishing. And now I do have my own eyewear collection. And of course, that was inspired. Honestly, I remember when I started JUNURI, I remember praying a prayer and saying, God, the next pair of glasses I buy needs to be one that I design. I was joking, but you know, the rest is history. But even that, you know, the message behind NURILENS is see through the lens of your purpose. Step out as your best authentic self. You know, there's no one else who can be you better than yourself. You know, so the best choice you can make is to be kind to yourself, to love yourself, to surround yourself with people who will speak life into you, who will pour into you, and step out as that best authentic self and really see through the lens of your purpose, envision your goal, envision your calling, and work toward achieving them. The beautiful thing about purpose is that it belongs to us, and no one can take it away from us. Versus potential, you know, I have the potential to be anything, but my purpose, that's mine. And whether I'm an entrepreneur, whether I'm unemployed, whether I'm a mom, a sister, a daughter, a cousin, a garbage woman, a mail carrier, whatever it is, I am going to achieve my purpose in every single season. And so that's basically what kind of birthed all of the problem children, I like to call them, that keep me up at night and keep me working. But you know, it's also a joy to know that people are inspired to step out as their best selves in one form or another. So
That is amazing. There was something you said that just jumped out to me. You said in fasting and prayer, the answer that I got was not to any of the questions I had.
yeah, it was about a guy. I won't even now I can talk about it. It was about a dude that I had no business talking to. It was about a guy I was interested in, but I knew that I wasn't, and I was grieving as well. So I was not in
Mm,
the headspace to even be in a relationship. And I'm coming in, and that individual also wasn't in a place to be in a relationship either.
mm.
And so I kind of, I guess like he's like, I'm like, okay, so we like each other. What am I supposed to do with this? And so I'm going into this fast, like demanding answers. I got no answers to that. The answers were, you know, you have a story, you have purpose, and you have skills and you have a gift to share, and go and share it. That was the answer, and it had nothing to do with the guy. Yeah,
I like that. I like that
um,
because
that
sometimes
that
we're
was over quickly. But
Yeah, because sometimes we're looking for something, and as you said that, the reason why it stood out to me is because I just had someone recently tell me, like, be open to receiving different information, or be open to,
oh,
like, oh, okay. I, I've noticed, like, and people have told me this, and it's something I'm working on. They're like, you're rigid. You're like, it's got to be this way, it's got to be that way. But what if you come around the corner? What if you open the door and it's something different? It's even bigger. And literally, the person that told me this, she said, literally, would you consider that the plans God has for you are ginormous, much bigger than this plan you have in your head that you're so rigid about? Like,
yeah,
oh, if it's not like this, I've been known to, like, what's the phrase? Like, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, this one
yeah,
part didn't go the way I wanted it. And then I'm
yeah,
just like, oh, I'm done with it. So when you said that, you're like, I got some answers, but that wasn't even the question I asked. And
right,
another thing you said, which was very interesting to me, you were like, what's normal? And purpose belongs to us. And I feel like that needs to be highlighted
absolutely,
again, as you said it, because the same person told me, like, what I was complaining about, was just call it what it is in the moment. I was like, well, this person doesn't support me, or this family member has never come to any of my stuff, yada yada yada. And they were like, would you consider that's not their assignment?
right,
Be in your assignment.
yeah,
Be in
yeah,
yours. There are certain things, as you talk about that purpose, that, like, you are on the earth to do this.
yeah,
And getting upset, disappointed in people that don't see your vision, that are not in alignment, are not on the bus, that's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time, because consider it's not their assignment, it's
right.
yours.
There was not a conference call with them to get their ideas
Mm.
on what your purpose was. That's kind of the way people can't understand your purpose if they weren't given the vision. And that's a tough thing, because we would love for people support. We would love for people to pour into us, to either spend money, to cheer us on. And the reality is, if they don't understand, they don't understand. And of course, you do want to be surrounded by people who they'll support the vision. They don't know what you're doing, but hey, we're here, right? I know I'm grateful for my parents, because I've done a couple of bold things in my lifetime. I went to South Korea to be an English teacher. I remember when I moved to the DMV area, I'd gotten a job offer to work for the government, and they gave me 2 weeks to pack my bags. And in 2 weeks, I packed my bags and I moved. No questions asked. And my parents had paid for a trip to Israel for a Jerusalem experience, and they paid a couple of G's for it. And they weren't happy about the lost money that they couldn't renege. And people had all types of comments. Why would you let your only child, your only daughter, move to some completely different state? And of course, we're coming from traditional Haitian values, right? And one thing I appreciate about my parents is, even when I knew they didn't agree, they always were still there to support. They were still there to hold me accountable. And friends as well. There are going to be people who are going to be like, yo, listen, I want no parts. And you have to be okay with it. You have to be okay with it, because even when, and I remember someone saying that you need to surround yourself with people who will support you in your purpose. Because when people are supporting you in your purpose, even though they haven't been given the vision, they trust and they have faith in the fact that your purpose is yours, and you will see it through. You will live through it. You will walk through it. And even if it doesn't look like what it looks like today, it's going to look like something eventually. So I'm grateful for, the people I have around me. Some people I've had to kind of distance myself from. Others I've had to just say, it's all right, but it's a no for me. But I'm grateful that, there are people who've been able to trust in, have faith in what the purpose was, even when they were not the one given the vision. And here they are with me, celebrating life, celebrating growth, and so on and so forth. And I'm doing the same for them. So
That's a whole word. Oh, you just gave us a word masterclass about, like, relationships, friendships, people in your corner. Because when you were talking, you're speaking my life. Same. I've made some, I guess you would call it bold, unpopular decisions. I'm
right.
also an only child,
Hello.
and there were people like, she gonna do that, and even probably my
Right.
parents were probably like scratching their head, but they're like, I got you. I got your back. And to
Right.
your point too, there have been people in my life that because it's me, they were like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't even really understand it. But because I know
Right.
you, because I know your character, like I'm down for it. And then also the other people want no parts. I don't get it. And if anything, you know what? I've had to realize like you don't need that energy. And I
Right.
don't need to have anyone else validate my vision, validate
Yeah.
my dreams, because having their negative chatter, it'll start to pour into me. And then it has
Absolutely.
me like second guessing or question, wait, is that really what I'm supposed to do? Is that how
Right.
I saw it? Is that really the vision? So
Right.
recognizing that, and that's taken time too, because it was initially hurtful. I'm like, how
Absolutely.
can you not support me?
Right.
And now that I'm in I would say a better place, because it's again, so many things. It's like, I feel like if anything, like the theme of what we're talking about is a process. It's a process to
Right.
be like, okay, this is what it is. Don't take offense to that. Be slow to
Mhm.
offend. Don't take offense to that. It's not their vision, not their purpose, not their assignment, and let it go.
And adjust accordingly. If they, that's something I've also learned. Like, we don't have to apologize for creating safe spaces for ourselves. If it's not safe, feel free to leave it. Feel
Mm,
free to leave it. And it's easier said than done, right? Feel free to honor yourself by blocking that person or by walking away from that opportunity, and trust that it was not for you. All money isn't good money. All friends aren't good friends. All relationships aren't good relationships. Not everything we see, all that glitters is not gold, right? And even then, all seeds that we see, they may not always produce fruit. Some may just never become anything. And we should be okay with saying, you know what, this doesn't look like it's healthy for me, you know, and be okay with saying, hey, I don't apologize for it. It doesn't work. It's not pouring into me. It's not helping me maintain my peace or my sanity. It's not reminding me to be kind to myself or to show myself grace or compassion. I'm stepping away from it, and trust that the right people will be placed in your life to really carry you through every season that you need to be carried through. So
that is so good. And everything you just said, I needed that. So if nobody else got anything from this, I needed everything, just a reminder, as you're going through life, because there's what they call it, hills and valleys, ups and lows,
absolutely.
and disappointments, and
Yeah.
just to be reminded that there are different seasons in life.
Yeah.
And I one of the things I was just telling someone the other day is like, recognize like maybe this is your planting season. Maybe this is not the season of harvest, and that's
Right.
okay. And I think that we're
And take
going
that
to
seat, learn.
yeah, I think we're going to see more and more, especially like I'm just hopefully, coming out of this pandemic and
Right.
getting back to whatever the new normal is, that there were people that put their head down over the past 2 years and they just worked. They were in their purpose, doing their thing,
Mhm.
and you'll start to see their public like, oh, victories, but you don't see what they went through privately. You don't know the tears they cried. You don't know the hours they
Right.
put in. You don't know how many people left them hanging, and they
Right.
kept at it. And that's like I have to continue to like remind myself too, like just do the work, stay
Absolutely.
in your vision, stay in what's been shown to you, and that's
Right.
okay who doesn't support you. And again,
Right.
it's a process, and same thing
Right.
with the season. So
Right.
so
Even if
good.
the work is going to therapy, I will say that loud and clear. Even if the work is going to therapy, I know the first year in the pandemic, that was one season of which I was having to pull myself out of a very hard place. And
Mhm.
for a few months, it was just me sleeping day in and day out. The only thing I woke up to do was work, but it was, you kind of feel like you're just existing. But the work for me in the pandemic was really having to heal, having
Mhm.
to confront more, having to have more conversations with myself, having to learn what it's like to be kind to myself and what it's like to show myself grace, and learning how to forgive myself, learning to take accountability for those things I've done to hurt myself before I'm looking for other people to take accountability for what they did to me. So even if that work you were doing throughout the entire pandemic or through whatever season is going to therapy and healing, be okay with that. That is so productive, and it will produce the most beautiful fruits, because once you get over that hill, it's like you're going up a hill and you'll want to go back because it's hard going up the hill. But once you get over that hump, no matter what causes you to want to go back up, you're not going to want to go back to the other side because you already know what it starts to feel like to feel a little better. You know what it's starting to feel like, and you don't want to go back to those people or those things that continue to cause you to go back to the pain and to cause you to go back to the frustration and the mental distress and so on and so forth. So yeah, even if your season is to heal, do that.
I always say, once you know, you can't unknow. Like
Right.
now that I've seen the promised land, like, oh, okay.
I'm not going back.
Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. But before I ask my final question, let everyone know where we can find you online.
Absolutely. You can visit my website. I'm also on Instagram and social media, Juliet Nuri Nelson, Juliette, N as in Nancy, URI, Nelson spelled N as in Nancy, ELSON, JulietNuriNelson.com. It has a link to JUNURI Publishing, NURILENS, and you can also follow me on Instagram. If you do add me on LinkedIn, please let me know you saw me on this show, Reset with Raven, so I know that you're not trying to sell me marketing material or anything like that. But yes, I would love to chat. I would love to connect. So definitely say hey.
Awesome. And the final question, what is the greatest lesson you've learned in your reset?
Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. That's it.
Look how simple and easy that was.
That is it.
I love it. This was powerful. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. We need to live for ourselves. Step out with kindness, love, grace, and passion. As always, remember, a reset is always available to you.